Hello, all you positive heads out there. Brandon Beecham here, and today we actually have occasional co-host Dalien back with us. It's been a while since the very beginning of the podcast. Hello, Mr. Dalien.
Hi there. How's everybody doing?
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
So, everyone, we have decided to do a little experiment with the Positive Head podcast, and that experiment entails potentially a daily podcast. So what we're going to do is I'm starting today, and we're just going to kind of see how it goes. You know, the great thing about interviewing is I get to talk to all kinds of amazing people doing amazing things and kind of shine a light on, you know, what they're out there doing and how it's helping the world and educating my listeners in the process. The downside of it is I don't get to rant nearly as much as I'd like to. So I figured what better way to get my rants out than to start a daily shorter podcast. And maybe it'll end up daily. Maybe it'll end up 3 times a week. Maybe it'll end up saying, you know, never mind. No one wants to hear me rant. I don't know exactly how it'll play out, but as for now, we're going to experiment, like I said, with daily this week and kind of take it from there. And Dalien has been kind enough to listen to me rant and chat with me as I proceed down the path of this experimentation. What we're going to do is, if you've been on the Positive Head site, you know we do positive pondering. So I'm a huge nerd when it comes to loving and appreciating quotes. So what I'm going to do is take those quotes or a quote of the day and talk about it. So instead of it being maybe we'll transcribe it and put it on the site as well. That remains to be seen. But I'll do a positive pondering. Here's a quote that I love. Let's talk about it a little bit each day. And from there, maybe one thing that Dalien and I were talking about is how much negative news there is out there. So wouldn't it be nice to do a bit of positive news each day? Maybe just a story that, you know, one of us has come across that we can highlight. So a little bit of positive news, daily positive pondering. Also, I'd love to get questions from the audience. That's something else that we really don't have time for on the interviews, but just to hear back from you guys, you know, here's a question that you have for me. So you actually can send those in. If you go to the podcast page on positivehead.com, you will see where you can submit a question just with your microphone through your computer, or you can, of course, if you want to write something out, you can do that too via email. So yeah, that's essentially what we're experimenting with here. Hope you guys enjoy it. Plan to probably keep them somewhere around 30 minutes a day, and we'll just see how it proceeds. So, Dalien, first things first, how does it feel to be back on the show? Are you super excited?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back. I am excited to be back on the show, even though I've been collaborating with you since the very beginning. So I've actually edited every episode of the podcast so far. I just haven't participated with you since like the early episodes. But I'm currently fully up to date on all the prior episodes and everything that's been discussed.
Yeah, so he started, if you guys have been listening since day one, he started on the podcast with the interviews, and we decided early on that we would eventually go down this path of doing podcasts, just him and I, where we talk about whatever's clever for that day. And so at that point in time, he decided to kind of take a backseat and just stick with, you know, behind the scenes editing and things like that of the podcast with the interviews, because between the interviewee and me wanting to speak way too often, we thought it just made the most sense to wait until we went this path. So for today's positive pondering, the quote I would like to offer up is by a gentleman named Richard Bach, an American author. The quote goes something or exactly like this: "You teach best what you most need to learn." And this quote was actually, I had never heard it until a few days ago. My partner Anna actually said it to me when I was talking about doing these daily podcasts. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a great quote. I absolutely love this quote because that's exactly why I love talking about spirituality, the ultimate nature of reality. It just rang so true. I need to learn this stuff more than anyone. So I appreciate you guys listening, but I'm doing this for selfish reasons most of all. And that is, you know, every time I talk about these sorts of concepts, it gets you into a certain state. It gets me excited. It gets me, I can feel my vibration changing as I talk about it. And it's why I like talking about it as often as possible. And so, yeah, and certainly I know I need to learn this stuff as much as anyone. I mean, it's, as a good friend of mine puts it, it's a daily conscious effort. It's one thing to understand this stuff theoretically, and it's another thing to actually live, in a state of acceptance and understanding and peace. So I think, what did Richard mean when he said you teach best what you most need to learn? He understood this. He understood that this was something, when you're really passionate about a particular topic, it's because you need to hear it most of all. And, why is that the case? Well, it's always a reflection, everyone that you come across, everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. And so you're literally teaching yourself on multiple levels when you really take a look at the structure of reality. If I'm talking to you about spirituality or anything in that whole realm, I'm talking to another me.
Yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're a different, your consciousness has just divided itself into different bodies. And that is, I think, as good of a definition, in my opinion, of what God is anything. I like the term, using the term source, or because it's not as charged as God, or love, of course. At the end of the day, I think that's what it is. But consciousness is another one, and that's exactly what we all are. We're just these conscious beings in different, meat suits, and it's just always another you. It's as consciousness is split itself off into these different bodies. And so anytime I'm teaching anything, it's like I'm the student more than anything, more than anyone else. Everyone else would come second. And of course, everyone I believe, takes the role of both teacher and student all the time. And if you think that you're only a teacher and you've got it all mastered, there's another great quote. It's like, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. It's like they will bring out challenges more than anyone. And so, we're all here. I believe we leave this place when we're done growing. And that's when people tap out and pass on, so to speak. And so if we're here learning. So I think that's really, really important when someone is moving into any kind of a teacher or teacher-esque role, to keep in the forefront of their mind is, we're students first and foremost. And anything that we're talking about is we're talking to ourselves, most of all.
Well, life has a way of reminding us too. Huh? Like if we ever get a little too sort of, sure that we know everything, inevitably something comes along that will sort of put you in your place, remind you, to be a little humble.
Yeah, for sure. Life definitely has a way of humbling all of us. I think as an old song that you and my brother Ryan wrote many years ago, humility is the key word when faced with these lessons, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite lines from their project, your project, The Variants, years ago. So great song.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really interesting with getting this, coming across this quote, because it actually led to a little bit of a synchronicity for me. There's a book many, many, many years ago that I read, and I loved the book. It was a short book, and I've looked for it many times over the years. Like I said, it was someone else actually owned the book, and that was a roommate at one time, and I read it because it was a very short book, loved it. Years later, thought about it again, couldn't remember the name of it. And I tried many times to try and figure out what it was because I wanted to reread it. And never was able to figure out what it was. So fast forward to a few days ago, and I'm talking to, my partner Anna about doing this daily kind of podcast and doing a positive, pondering, breaking down a quote each day, kind of like what would the format be if I were to do this. And she threw that quote out there during the conversation. I was like, oh, perfect. So I need to look it up. I'm going to use that one as my first one. Teach best what you most need to learn. So I go out and I start I search to find out, who said this? Who is it? It's that this author that wrote the book that I've been looking for all these years. And the book is called Illusions, Adventure of a Reluctant Messiah. It was written in the 70s. Really great book. Highly recommend it if you guys out there want a quick, fun, fictional book that is definitely based on some true concepts that I think you can take away. For those of you who don't like reading too much nonfiction, it's a great book. Almost in the vein of like Celestine Prophecy or something like that, where it's this great fun story, but based off of real kind of concepts. Have you read the book, Dan?
I read that book years ago. I think around the time you read it too. Yeah, I agree with your opinions on the book itself, because it's a short, sweet little read. It's just got like great language, and it's just sort of like, simple but very profound, very sort of poetic and pretty, and just,
kind of there's a bit of humor in it from what I remember as well. So yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that, searching for this quote that she threw out at me led back to this book that I've been trying to find again for years. So
I think you talk about it in another podcast as well. But I was just going to throw out there real quick that since you were talking about this book that you like.
I mentioned it in a previous podcast. I don't even recall then.
Not this book, but the one that I'm going to reference, which is one of our favorite books of all time, like you and I, Return of the Bird Tribes.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to throw it out there because it's a really excellent book that I can never.
It's kind of similar as well. It has a story element to it that is based off of some real concepts. In that case, it's a supposedly a channeled book, right? With Return of the Bird Tribes. And yeah, that's definitely up there. It's one of my favorites. It's very poetic and beautifully written, very cool story. So, yeah, that's the quote that I just wanted to highlight today. And, for all of us out there that are teaching to some capacity or talking a lot about some of these concepts, before we get too full of ourselves, remember we need to learn it more than anyone else. So it's an important point. The other thing that I kind of want to touch on with these is a bit of positive news. So we'll, once again, it's so much negative stuff out there, and everyone is inundated and bombarded with it. So one of the things that I think would be cool is to find something that inspires us that's happening in the world, and that's kind of I guess it's an extension of what I'm doing with the interviews each week. And by the way, I'm gonna still do an interview each week, in addition to these shorter kind of, podcasts that me and Dalien do together. But, yeah, so one of the stories that came across my feed or something here in the last couple days online was a story in Canada, how there's the first Canadian city to eliminate homelessness. It's Medicine Hat in Alberta, and it's really interesting. Every one of the city's 60,000 people are sleeping with a roof over their heads. And what they did is they mandated housing for anyone who spent 10 days in a shelter or on the streets. And the fascinating part about it was you look at it costs the city about $20,000 a year to house a homeless person, but $100,000 a year if they're living on the streets. Oh, wow. So it's actually much more cost effective. They were not the first ones to do it. As I kind of looked into this, and I was just fascinated. Utah reduced homelessness by 91%. Over 10 years, and now they have 178 people that are homeless, total
in the entire state.
Yeah, I think there's that many in LA in a block,
Exactly.
So it's pretty fascinating when we look at, instead of saying, hey, get yourself together, you bum, and clean yourself up, and find a job. It's like, it's hard to do that when you're on drugs, on the street, feel awful about yourself. Meanwhile, the opposite approach, taking them, giving them somewhere to stay, giving them a helping hand, giving them a lift. And then what they're finding also, it says here, and some of the research that I did, is a lot of these people are now kind of dealing with their past demons. They're showing up in court, clearing up whatever issues that are looming out there for them. And it's just a great example of, instead of, looking down on someone for being down and out, instead giving them a hand, lifting them up, and that usually goes a long way with people and to fixing. It's the same with like the drug problem, incarcerating people who are, have issues with drugs, like, clean up, you idiot. Let's, we're going to show you, what a screw up you are, and we're going to punish you. Instead, like, no, these people need help. Let's help them. So it's so exciting to see that this sort of thing is starting to, first, I guess, in Utah and now somewhere in Canada. So I'm really optimistic and hopeful that this is something that will spread, to other cities around, the world.
That's really cool, Brian. I since you brought up the whole drug thing, it did make me think of a similar story I read in the news about the Gloucester, Mass. Police Department. The city of Gloucester, Massachusetts, decided that instead of incarcerating drug addicts, they were going to offer them any kind of treatment and assistance they could.
Oh, wow.
So if you're, say, a heroin user in Gloucester, Mass., you can walk into the police department and sort of turn yourself in, but instead of being arrested and incarcerated, you will be turned over to, I think, a social worker or something like that, and they're going to put you on a drug program immediately. No judgment, no, slapping of the wrist, nothing like that. And I just had
so commonsensical, like,
of course,
compared to the way we've been doing things.
Yeah. I had to send them a quick email to thank Chief Peter Campanella of the police department. He's the one who, I believe, initiated the program just out of recognition that, he had been in law enforcement for many years, arresting people for drug offenses, and realized that wasn't helping, wasn't doing anything.
Wow, that's incredible. So that's our bit of positive news for today. Thank you for listening. No, we got a little bit more here with the show. So what I'm going to do next is, like I said, I want to take questions. So we actually are encouraging any of you out there listening, to submit them either through, you can just record right through your computer microphone, or, via submission on the contact page or the Positive Head podcast page at positivehead.com. So to get things started, since this is our very first episode like this, I asked a friend who always has great questions for me. Give me a question for the first show. So Chris Ponzi, thank you so much for your great question. And it goes a little something like this. It seems that the spiritual and conscious movement is growing more popular, maybe even trendy. How do we prevent the deeply spiritual and non-petty components of this movement from getting overly diluted or even taken over by strong superficial tendencies of our dominant culture? Much like the highly spiritual and holistic practice of yoga has been turned into a fitness fad in many respects here. Is it inevitable? So, Dalien, why don't you take your first crack at answering that?
Well, I think it's inevitable to some degree, really. But I think that my shortened sort of all-inclusive answer to that is consciousness and awareness itself is sort of the answer, because I generally agree with Chris that, some of these things are turning into fads in a way. And I think that the way to sort of combat that is not really to push against it so hard, but just to make people aware.
Yeah.
If certain, say, people in the yoga community, for example, are becoming a little maybe too much about the form and not the essence of the practice, then, just do whatever we can to remind them what the essence of the practice is.
Yeah. It's something that is inevitable, like, he says, to some degree. As you have people that, I personally believe, a theory that I've heard that really resonates as true to me is, well, when you think about what's happening on our planet right now, we're hurtling through space and at a tremendous speed, and we're entering new region. We're in a spaceship, right? We're entering new regions of the cosmos. And one of the theories that I've heard thrown around a lot is that we're actually entering an area that is a higher vibrational state. And as a result of that, it's causing all the cells in our bodies to have to increase their frequency and so forth. And that's the physical manifestation of the kind of spiritual awaken or ascension that's happening. I find that theory pretty interesting and something that intuitively feels true. But so when you think about that concept is happening. And I can certainly see, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast before, I've been on this path for many, many years and going on 2 decades now. And, I'd talk about some of these concepts for years and years, and people would tell me, okay, that's really interesting theory, or you're crazy. What are you smoking? But now I just come across people constantly who are, on the same page, and, a lot through the transformational festival scene and things like that. And so as you have people that are coming online, so to speak, waking up to the ultimate nature of reality and who and what they are, and that, wow, okay, this is just a dream. Everything that I see is a projection of light. This is we're in a very convincing virtual reality hologram. And as you have more and more people waking up to that concept, it's inevitable that you're going to have people in all different, I guess, points in the process. And part of it, one of the biggest obstacles to our evolution and ascension, so to speak, as spiritual beings is ego. EGO, everybody's greatest obstacle, or edging God out. I've heard.
Oh, you have a few clever.
Yeah, a few clever ones. So I think you're going to get those people that are, just waking up to these kind of concepts, but there's a lot of ego processing that still needs to happen. And, it's something that we all have to check every day. Where's my ego at? Is it getting in the way of whatever it is I'm trying to do? And that's one of the things I want to be really careful of with this show. My intention is to be really, really raw and vulnerable, all the time about, hey, here's where I'm slipping, or here's where I struggle, or because people can relate to that. I think, I saw someone put out there recently, actually my friend Yegon, who I interviewed months and months ago. If you guys can check out the Kalia Scintilla podcast, he posted something recently that I really liked. He said online, did you guys hear that? Something to this effect. Did you guys hear that raw and real is the new cool? And it's so true. It's like people love it when you're raw and real, and you put yourself on the line and you expose yourself, because they can relate to that. There's so much posturing with Facebook and Instagram and, it's like, here's my perfect life. And that's why I really hesitate to put a lot of things, when I travel or do things, a lot of times I'm just putting quotes and things like that, just because, I don't know. I feel like it's almost like bragging to some degree, I don't know. And I'm not trying to put anyone down that does put all their wonderful highlights, but I just, for that reason, it's one that I haven't put a lot of things or share a lot of things that I do. But yeah, it's something that's inevitable, though, because this ego piece is the biggest piece of waking up, because that's what's blocking us to our higher selves, to more information coming through. So you're going to have people who, as it's becoming trendy and cool, instead of it being authentic, maybe there's some level of, oh, this is cool. I love the style. I love the clothes of, sacred geometry or whatever it may be. And I think that's okay, and it is inevitable, and that's okay. I can think back, we had some people, it makes me laugh, we had some people had a get together maybe a year or so ago here at my house, and we made dinner for people, and it was people in the festival community, and we had some people come that we didn't know that well, and they kind of, I'd met them one time before, and they just have this air of like, holier than thou or better than, and one of the guys that was here, we were making fish or something. He's like, oh, I only eat cold water fish. And so me and I always laugh about, the fish people. And that's kind of what he's talking about here is the fish people that kind of, they're waking up to this stuff, but yet there's still like a pretentiousness that can come with it, or making it just trendy, and it's not necessarily authentic. And, I think it's okay. I think we're all moving. It's all, evolution is happening, and people will get taught what they need to be taught. There's actually, I think of in the festival community, a producer, DJ that has been out there for some time, and I kept hearing for years about, this guy's music was really good. I won't mention any names, but his music is really good. But I kept hearing stories about what an egomaniacal, a-hole the guy could be. And it was interesting for me, because I'm like, wow, his music is really good and seems really, has this very, spiritual vibe. And
it's the kind of music wouldn't make you think that the creators like that.
Yeah, right. But I kept hearing from various sources, about this person and how, what a kind of douche they were. And sure enough, didn't hear much about him for a year or so. And then it just came up recently and someone's like, yeah, he hasn't been getting booked because of his, his attitude. And, he's really been humbled. Someone that knew him, recently, he's been humbled a lot, I think. And it's like, so I've just kind of heard the story here and there of this person over the last couple of years from being like, this awesome artist with a bad attitude to now being this humbled artist who's not really getting booked anymore because of it. And so, I think the universe teaches us those lessons that we need. So when you have someone who's just attaching themselves to these ideas because it's trendy, or they get into a state of I'm better than someone else, it's like you're missing the point, because it's literally all other yous. You can't be better than anyone. You're one with everyone. And if you're not really and that can, of course, be a concept that feels somewhat far-fetched, or doesn't feel, it's like, yeah, okay, that sounds great theoretically, but it doesn't really make any difference in my life. This person seems very separate from me. And I think it's really important. It's something that I try and bring to the forefront of my mind is, everywhere I go, I'm there waiting for myself. And if someone is being a certain way that's challenging to me or something like that, I try and understand it and also say, okay, what is this reflecting back to me? What do I have to learn from this? How is, if everyone truly is a reflection, what can I learn from it? And how can I accept it and be more, I think, how can I increase my bandwidth of acceptance, And so I think it was a really great question, Chris, and one that worth a bit of discussion for sure.
Yeah. In fact, I think that maybe that's something that could be sort of discussed on an ongoing basis, just because there's so many like kind of pitfalls to, spiritual practice in every way. And, we want to kind of keep ourselves in check and make sure that we are sort of sticking to the path and not getting lost in our own delusions, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And just yes, it's going to happen. Yes, it's going to be become. I foresee it becoming more and more popular and more trendy. And with that, you're going to have more and more people attaching themselves to kind of the movement, so to speak, and people that are at various stages of their own development who maybe are getting it from one perspective, but are not getting it from another. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's the way you put it a couple minutes ago. And I thought that was really the great point that you made about that whole thing, is that for someone, it may be sort of like a shallow or superficial thing, but maybe that's their way in. And that's what I think that's what I got from what you said, is that even if it's sort of like a shallow practice for you initially, maybe that's, not only okay for where you're at that point in your life, but also that's your sort of, like you said, your way into the subject or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, there's so many people, even, at festivals that will show up at these events and it's their first event like that. And they came for the party, but 4 days later they're leaving and they've had an experience that truly has kind of transformed them and shifted their experience, shifted their perspective in a way, because not only are they hearing and seeing things that they haven't heard or seen before, but just being it's one of the things I talk about a lot with festivals is being in that container with that many people who are intended, to improve themselves, committed to self-growth, understanding and seeing more about, the ultimate nature of reality. It energetically has an effect on you, even without any words being spoken. You're just being in the presence of thousands of people who are on that kind of path. It does something to you. We're all so much more sensitive than I think people realize to energies around us and how they affect us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, great question once again, Chris. And thank you guys for letting us experiment on you today. And I'd love to hear any feedback that you have as far as, hey, this is a great idea. Like I said, we're just going to kind of play with the idea and we'll see how it solidifies, over the coming weeks and so forth. And love to get questions from any of you guys. Once again, through the site, you can email us or just feedback what you think about us doing. Like I said, the tentative plan is to try and do one of these a day, short one a day, 30 minutes ish. And of course, continue with the regular interviews as well. So yeah, thanks again for listening, everyone. And remember, as I always cheesily said, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.